This is Wyatt and Gary.
The Lisa we never saw. Casting Lisa turned into Hollywood musical chairs. First, John Hughes hired model Kelly Ember. 2 days into filming, she was gone. Creative differences, they said. Meanwhile, Kelly LeBrock was in the south of France with her husband and Sting horseback riding and drinking wine. When Universal called, she basically said, "Work or play with Sting. Pass me the rose." So Hughes tried other options, including Demi Moore and Robin Wright. Fun fact, they auditioned opposite Michael Robbins, who ended up in a background role as one of the weenies. Anyway, the movie still wasn't working, and with weeks of unusable footage, Universal panicked. They called LeBrock again, promising her, in her words, "Whatever you want." Within hours, she was on a plane to Chicago. And what did she film on day one? The infamous shower scene in Ember's hastily sliced-up costumes. From there, LeBrock became every teenage boy's digital dream. Music. Demi, meanwhile, walked straight into Joel Schumacher's orbit. She later said she was leaving a Hughes audition when Schumacher spotted her and pulled her into St. Elmo's Fire. That role launched her as the Brat Pack's dramatic heart and set her on the path to Ghost and A Few Good Men. So yeah, LeBrock gave us steamy entrances, and Demi gave us pottery with Patrick Swayze. Hard to argue with how that split worked out. Number 13. The sitcom nobody saw coming. Weird Science went from an R-rated teen fantasy to a PG-rated family sitcom when USA Network decided the movie about two horny teens building a woman in their bedroom was perfect fodder for 5 seasons of wholesome Friday night programming. But here's the twist. The show wasn't really a sequel, and it wasn't exactly a reboot either. It lived in that weird in-between space where the pilot literally winked at the movie. At one point, Gary even said he got the idea to create Lisa from a John Hughes movie. That's about as soft reboot as it gets. This time, Lisa was played by Vanessa Angel, and instead of being a one-time miracle, she was more of a digital genie. So this is what you boys consider a dream, babe. Let's say this body is a scathing indictment of a sexist, brain-dead MTV generation. Problems at school, bullies, a bad haircut, zap. Lisa whipped up a magical fix. Sometimes it was time travel, sometimes it was aliens, and sometimes it was just a moral lesson dressed up in early CGI that looked like a Windows 95 screensaver. She was also addicted to Chunky Monkey ice cream because apparently even perfect digital women have their weaknesses. Wyatt was played by Michael Manasseri, Gary by John Mallory Asher, and their genuine off-screen friendship gave the show a surprising bit of charm. I need to feel its cool, dark metal against my skin. Now, remember what Lisa said. This thing affects all of time, so use it sparingly. Fun, what if here, though. Seth Green was almost cast as Gary, but lost out. Though he did show up later in the Season 2 premiere, Lisa's Virus. Chet was back too, now played by Lee Tergesen. Instead of being a sadistic nightmare like Bill Paxton's version, he was more of a cranky buzzkill, a military school graduate who turned down his commission because he didn't want to work for third-world slackers. And for most of the series, Lisa just erased his memory after every run-in until, hilariously, he built up an immunity. Behind the scenes, John Hughes had nothing to do with the series. It was developed by Tom Spezialy and Alan Cross with no Hughes input after the film, but the show leaned into quirky, self-aware humor to keep things fresh. Right to the good parts. Can I help? Do you have to explode in like that every time? Well, excuse me. Who are you calling those cranks? I'm sorry. Oh, and Vanessa Angel. She became a 90s fan favorite off this role. She even had a near miss with TV history. She was in talks to play Xena, warrior princess, but got sick right before filming. The part went to Lucy Lawless, and the rest is sword-swinging history. Despite its toned-down vibe, the series managed a 5-season run with 88 episodes and built its own cult following. Some fans even prefer it to the movie, but let's be real, no one's quoting the sitcom when they talk about Weird Science. The end came abruptly in 1997 with 6 lost episodes, so forgotten they didn't even air until a year later on the Sci-Fi Channel. Fitting, since by then the whole thing had gone full Monster of the Week. But hey, for a show that started as a raunchy Hughes fantasy and ended as a family-friendly sitcom, Weird Science proved you could rewire a cult classic into just about anything. Number 12, PG-13 Growing Pains. The PG-13 rating was barely a year old when Weird Science hit theaters in 1985. Officially, Red Dawn gets the credit as the first PG-13 release, though film buffs point out that The Flamingo Kid was actually the first to receive the rating. It just didn't reach theaters until later. Either way, Hughes and Universal wasted no time seeing how far they could stretch the new category. And stretch it they did. This teen comedy served up a topless wireframe model on a computer screen, booze, swearing, Bill Paxton improvising as a grotesque blobchet, and even flashes of nudity in that climactic windstorm. It wasn't R-rated, but it sure wasn't the kind of PG your little brother was watching on Saturday mornings either. Doesn't she? That's funny you say that, 'cause I was thinking the same thing. And what happened was, so what do you do for a living, Al? The PG-13 label itself came out of the uproar over Gremlins and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, but Weird Science showed just how blurry the line really was. It landed squarely in that hard PG-13 zone, confusing parents, thrilling teens, and making its theatrical run a rite of passage. VHS rentals just extended the shock factor later, when parents realized what they'd actually brought home. Before you started messing around with your computer, I didn't even exist. By the way, you did an excellent job. For Gen X kids, the movie felt like a free pass into raunchy comedy and a reminder that in the 80s, Hollywood was still figuring out what PG-13 really meant. Chevy's loss, Gary's gain. Picture this. Anthony Michael Hall had to pick between Chevy Chase and John Hughes. On one side was National Lampoon's European Vacation, an easy sequel, Payday, and another ride with one of the biggest comedy stars of the 1980s. On the other side was Hughes, who had already made Hall the king of the geeks in 16 Candles and The Breakfast Club. Hall went with loyalty. How's it going? How's what going? You know things, life, whatnot. He and Hughes were tight, and Weird Science meant a third collaboration in a row. Yeah, Gary Wallace was still a dork, but this time Hall wasn't just the sidekick or the punchline. He was the hero nerd who got to conjure Kelly LeBrock in a shower. Big upgrade. Meanwhile, the Vacation franchise rolled on without him. Jason Lively took over as Rusty, and from then on the Griswold kids were recast in every sequel. What started as a casting scramble turned into a running gag. The joke being that Clark and Ellen Griswold never noticed their children kept showing up with new faces. You know, you totally would, but could have been the best day of my life back there. What are you complaining about? I lost my boyfriend thanks to this vacation. I vote we don't talk about Jack anymore. Hall's choice paid off short-term, cementing him as a core member of the Brat Pack. Long-term, even got to outgrow the geek stereotype with gigs on Saturday Night Live, Edward Scissorhands, and The Dead Zone. But in 1985, it boiled down to this. Chevy Chase lost his Rusty, and Hall gained his cult classic crown. Sometimes you've just got to pick creating the perfect woman over another vacation. Number 10. Lisa was named after a $10,000 flop. John Hughes named his perfect woman after one of Apple's biggest flops. Lisa didn't just come out of a floppy disk. Her name came from the Apple Lisa, a $10,000 business computer that tanked harder than Chevy Chase's talk show. The Apple Lisa had a dual origin. Officially, it stood for Local Integrated Software Architecture. Unofficially, it was a nod to Steve Jobs' daughter, Lisa Brennan Jobs. Somebody finally did. Lisa from Apple. So advanced it puts us right back where we started, alone again. So yeah, the Lisa in Weird Science was named after both a failed piece of software and a real human being. Try explaining that family connection at Thanksgiving. The computer itself was a noble failure. It was insanely expensive, barely sold, and got completely overshadowed by the Macintosh a year later. But its innovations, the graphical interface, the mouse, the menus, it all set the stage for the Mac's success. In other words, Apple Lisa walked so the Mac could run. And then there was the glorious irony. Apple built Lisa to revolutionize high-level business. Hughes used Lisa to show two horny teens loading a woman into existence with floppy disks. Cutting-edge tech reduced to the world's most expensive puberty aid. So while the Apple Lisa was remembered as an expensive dud, John Hughes' Lisa became an 80s icon. Not bad for a name borrowed from a doomed computer and the very real daughter of Steve Jobs. Number 9. The Shermerverse and recycled high school footage. John Hughes quietly built his own cinematic universe before Marvel even thought about it. Welcome to Shermer, Illinois, the fictional suburb where every Hughes teen seemed to live, angst, and occasionally build a woman on a computer. Shermer wasn't just a random setting. Hughes named it after his real hometown's original name, Shermerville, and used it as a symbolic every town. It was his way of saying, this isn't just my suburb, this is your suburb too. And because Hughes loved a good shortcut, he didn't just reuse the town. He borrowed the actual footage. The exterior of Shermer High in Weird Science is literally the exact same shot he used in 16 Candles. The real building was Niles East High School in Skokie, Illinois, which had shut down in 1980. For Hughes, it was a director's dream. No students to work around and total freedom to stage whatever chaos he wanted. They even flooded the pool there for some of Weird Science's interiors. Talk about getting your money's worth out of an empty campus. Shermer details pop up everywhere. The town zip code in the Breakfast Club is actually Hughes' hometown of Northbrook. The water tower that shows up in Weird Science, well, that's the same one famously painted with Save Ferris a year later. And yes, continuity nerds, Anthony Michael Hall played different characters at the same school in back-to-back Hughes movies. I would expect you to know the difference. Yeah, well, he's got a name. Yeah? What's your name? Brian. See, but instead of being a glitch, fans treated it like a badge of honor. Hughes wasn't sweating canon. He was chasing vibe. If it felt right, it made the cut. He also repurposed actors like John Candy and Edie McClurg in multiple Shermer stories, just in different roles. It's like the Hughes stock company, if you will. So yeah, the Shermerverse was messy, inconsistent, and stitched together with stock footage. And that's exactly why we loved it. Hughes built an entire teen mythology out of one closed high school and a whole lot of attitude. Number 8. Oingo Boingo's Too Poppy theme song. When John Hughes needed a theme song, he cold-called Danny Elfman and basically willed the Weird Science theme into existence. Elfman thought the pitch was a prank, but by the time he got home from the call, he had the melody mapped out in his head. The problem? He hated it. Oingo Boingo were known for theatrical dark new wave songs about death and madness. Weird Science was bubblegum pop. Elfman later called it a sideways jump. Catchy, sure, but not who they were. Then came the music video. Normally Elfman was hands-on with Oingo Boingo's visuals, but this time he was buried in other projects and showed up on set without any control. It was the only Oingo Boingo video he didn't oversee, and he paid for it. The finished product was a neon-colored mad scientist circus Elfman, later described as pretty in-your-face pop awful. When Beavis and Butthead mocked it years later, Elfman said he'd officially earned his embarrassment. How come they didn't let that dude back in Duran Duran? He hated performing the song, too. After about a year, he pulled it from Oingo Boingo's set list, calling it a novelty tune that never really fit their repertoire. As if that weren't enough, Weird Science itself didn't always sound the same, depending on where you saw it. Thanks to rights issues, the home video and TV versions sometimes swapped out songs. Oingo Boingo's theme even replaced Roy Orbison's Pretty Woman in certain cuts. Fans watching it at home got a slightly different movie than the one that played in theaters. For Elfman, it was a track he wanted to forget. For Gen X audiences, it became unforgettable. One of the band's biggest hits, a Billboard Hot 100 single, and the song that lived on as the theme to the TV spin-off. Now, if you're digging this trip back to 1985, do us a favor. Hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and share this with a friend who definitely tried hooking jumper cables to their Commodore 64. Trust us, it helps keep the nostalgia flowing every week. Disgusting hangover cures ever suggested in a teen comedy? That line wasn't from John Hughes' script. It came straight out of Bill Paxton's childhood. You see, Paxton grew up in Fort Worth, Texas, where his dad had a very Texas-style way of letting the boys know he was on to their late-night partying. Instead of nagging, he'd lean in with, "How about a greasy pork sandwich served in a dirty ashtray?" How about a nice greasy pork sandwich served in a dirty ashtray? Equal parts stomach turner and guilt trip. Paxton loved it so much he dragged it into the movie. And Hughes, who always trusted his actors to improvise, just let it ride. It was the perfect bully line. It was gross, unforgettable, and mean in a way that felt like it came from lived experience. And that was peak Bill Paxton. The guy built a career out of turning side characters into scene stealers. From Aliens to Twister, here he turned his dad's gross-out guilt trip into one of the most quotable bullying moments of the decade. From a Fort Worth kitchen to Hollywood comedy gold. Number 6, Wyatt was a ballerino. Before he was zapping dream women into existence in Weird Science, Elon Mitchell-Smith was spinning pirouettes in a ballet studio. Born in New York City, he got into ballet young and stuck with it even after moving to Amherst, Massachusetts. By age 11, he was training 4 days a week and attending a program at the Joffrey Ballet School. Some bios also say he scored a scholarship to the School of American Ballet. So, yeah, this kid was legit. He wasn't a professional dancer, but he was definitely on track for it. That is until Hollywood accidentally happened. Director Sidney Lumet sent a casting agent to Elon's ballet school looking for a kid who was stage-ready and disciplined. Not necessarily a dancer, just someone who could handle a camera. Elon landed the part of a young Timothy Hutton in Daniel from 1983. And boom, new career unlocked. 2 years later, he's in Weird Science rocking a headband and panicking about bras. Wild detour from the bar. And if you're wondering where he went, Elon pieced out of acting in the 90s, got a PhD from Texas A&M, and now teaches English at Cal State Long Beach, specializing in medieval literature and knights, who definitely wouldn't be caught dead with floppy disks. From ballet slippers to blockbuster teen comedy to the lecture hall, Wyatt's glow-up might be the weirdest science of all. Number 5. Vernon Wells brought Mad Max to the suburbs. Weird Science went full Mad Max for no reason at all, and it was glorious. Halfway through a high school house party, Vernon Wells walked through a broken window looking suspiciously like Wes from The Road Warrior. Mohawk, leather, even more leather, and chains. Basically one copyright lawyer away from a lawsuit. Now here's the kicker. Weird Science wasn't just Wells spoofing himself. It was his first American film. His U.S. debut wasn't a gritty wasteland epic or a serious action movie. No, it was parodying his own role by harassing a bunch of teens in suburban Chicago. Talk about a baptism by neon. Music, applause. Producer Joel Silver loved him so much that he cast Wells again immediately. This time as Bennett in Commando. Here's some fun Hollywood chaos trivia. Wells only got that gig because the first actor, Wingshauser, got fired on day one. So if you've ever wondered how Wes went from Weird Science to taunting Arnold Schwarzenegger, there's your answer. And it wasn't just Wells and the gang. Horror fans will recognize Michael Berryman, best known as Pluto in The Hills Have Eyes, because nothing says teen comedy like a Hills Have Eyes psycho crashing your kegger. It's a kind of crossover only the 80s could have pulled off. You had Mad Max villains, horror icons, and a John Hughes nerd fantasy all colliding in one gloriously weird living room. Number 4. The missile that launched backward. Remember when Wyatt's bedroom casually sprouted a Cold War missile, like it was a new IKEA lamp? That wasn't CGI. It was classic 1980s practical effects with a clever twist. The gag involved a missile erupting through the house, thanks to a misfire in Gary and Wyatt's creation process. Yeah, they forgot to properly hook up the electrodes, and instead of conjuring another woman, the computer locked onto a magazine photo of a Pershing II missile. We forgot to hook up the door. You forgot to hook up the door. Naturally, out popped a warhead. To pull it off, the effects team used a practical model combined with breakaway walls, set debris, and reverse footage. They filmed the missile being lowered into the set, then played it backward to make it appear as if it had shot up through the floor. Effects supervisor Doug Hubbard called it a logistical nightmare, but the result was pure Hughes absurdity. While some stories claim they used a full-scale missile, that's almost certainly exaggerated due to cost, weight, and safety. The production relied on a prop or scaled model. Still, it looked real enough to make you wonder how this teen comedy suddenly became a nuclear standoff. And when Lisa fixed the house at the end, it was the same trick. Reverse the footage and let movie magic handle the rest. Only in the 80s could teenage hormones, home computing, and Cold War weaponry blend into one surreal bedroom explosion. Number 3. The five-figure blob disaster. The part where Bill Paxton's Chet got turned into a farting, burping pile of ooze. Quit screwing around. This isn't funny, you stupid. Oh, now careful, Chet. Don't make me angry. Sorry. Yeah, that became one of the priciest headaches on the shoot. Here's what happened. Paxton was supposed to climb inside a massive rubber puppet and operate Blob Chet from within. But the moment he squeezed in, claustrophobia hit and he bailed. Suddenly, the effects team had a very expensive problem. A giant blob suit and no one to wear it. The fix? 2 shorter performers. Kevin Thompson. Yeah, one of the Ewoks from Return of the Jedi. And Joe Jeeb stepped in to run the creature from inside. The last-minute pivot reportedly turned the gag into a costly 5-figure solution. A big bite for an 80s teen comedy working on a $7.5 million budget. And the fallout didn't stop there. John Hughes was already grumpy making Weird Science while angling to do The Breakfast Club. And this fiasco didn't help. The irony is that Blob Chet still lands as one of the movie's best bits. Lisa forced him to apologize to Wyatt. And even under pounds of rubber and slime, Paxton somehow managed to ooze arrogance. Fans still rank it among the movie's ultimate wait, what am I watching moments. Hughes stuck with teen angst. Paxton became Hollywood's favorite scene-stealing character actor. Aliens and Twister anyone. And for one glorious minute, he was also the Blob who apologized badly. Number 2. Hughes only directed it as a bargaining chip. P5. Number 2. Hughes only directed it as a bargaining chip. John Hughes was devoted to The Breakfast Club so much so that he practically sold his soul to Universal just to get it made. Weird Science wasn't his dream project. It was the bargaining chip he wrote in a caffeine-fueled rush. Here's how it went down. Hughes had already written The Breakfast Club back in 1982, but Universal wasn't buying his raw personal film about teen angst and identity. He's married, too. Do you have any idea how completely gross that is? The first few times. The first few times? You mean he did it more than once? Sure. Are you crazy? Honestly, it's crazy if she's screwing a shrink. They wanted something marketable. Translation. Less talky feelings, more sci-fi hijinks and special effects you could slap on a poster. So Hughes struck a deal. He'd write and direct Weird Science, on the condition Universal let him make The Breakfast Club. After directing 16 Candles, Hughes cranked out the Weird Science script in just 2 days, a single weekend. Start to finish. That was Hughes's style. Hit the typewriter like a man possessed, surprise himself as he went, and let the story spill out. He didn't outline, he didn't fuss. He called it Discovery, and it wasn't a one-off. He wrote Ferris Bueller's Day Off in a week and Mr. Mom in a day and a half. The timeline gets interesting here. Hughes filmed The Breakfast Club in early 1984, then moved on to Weird Science later that year while his passion project was still in post-production. The cast of Weird Science later admitted Hughes seemed distracted on set, like he was itching to move on. Even Anthony Michael Hall noticed it, remembering Hughes scribbling down notes for other scripts, possibly edits for The Breakfast Club or ideas for Ferris Bueller. And honestly, that breakneck speed is part of the weird magic. Weird Science wasn't a carefully engineered sci-fi comedy. It felt like a weekend brainstorm because that was exactly what it was. Basically, Lisa came out of a computer because Hughes wanted to put 5 kids in detention. Applause. But here's the irony. Both movies landed in 1985, and both have become iconic. The Breakfast Club hit theaters in February, followed by Weird Science in August. It was the perfect double feature from a director working at warp speed. One film made to keep the studio happy, and one made to keep himself sane. Number 1. Weird Science came from a comic book. Kind of. Weird Science didn't just spring from John Hughes' imagination. It shares its name with a 1950s EC comic series, known for twisted sci-fi and dark morality tales. But while the tone may match, the movie's plot is totally original. And why don't you set yourself up with one of them, too? Set yourself up. That's 3 sides, please. The EC Comics title Weird Science ran from 1950 to 1953, and producer Joel Silver had acquired the rights to EC's library, which explains how the film got its title. Fans often point to a 1951 story called Made of the Future from Weird Science No. 5, where a man assembles a wife from a futuristic hit. Sounds close, right? Well, not quite. The movie doesn't directly adapt that story or any specific EC plot. It's more of a spiritual remix. Hughes took the pulpy atomic age weirdness of EC and retooled it for Reagan-era teens. Instead of cautionary tale, we got Cold War missiles erupting from suburban bedrooms and mutant bikers trashing a high school party. So while Weird Science borrowed the title and the vibe, the plot was 100% Hughes. More The Breakfast Club meets Frankenstein than page-for-panel adaptation. Still, there's something perfect about it. A cult classic about building a dream woman out of 1980s tech born from a Cold War comic about building wives in the future. Now that's Weird Science. And there you have it, 15 weird facts about weird science that prove the 80s were equal parts genius and chaos. Which ones shock you the most? Let us know in the comments section below. And if you want more nostalgia trips, check out our Retro TV playlist linked in the description. If you had fun, hit like and subscribe. It really does help us keep these flashbacks coming every week. Now, until next time, this is Remember When.